Hi, my name is Dale, and today we're going to begin reading My Stroke of Insight. And I'm going to read the description on the back of it, and then we'll get started. But I discovered this book because of the author's TED Talk, and I found it extremely interesting. So I believe that it's a essential book that you should know about because it teaches us about our brain. Okay, so let's just get started. On December 10th, 1996, Jill Bolte Taylor, a 37-year-old Harvard trained brain scientist, experienced a massive stroke in the left hemisphere of her brain. As she observed her mind deteriorate to the point that she could not walk, talk, read, write, or recall any of her life, all within 4 hours, Taylor alternated between the euphoria of the intuitive and kinesthetic right brain, in which she felt a sense of complete well being and peace and the logical sequential left brain, which recognized she was having a stroke and enabled her to seek help before she was completely lost. It would take her 8 years to fully recover. For Taylor, the stroke was a blessing and a revelation. It taught her that stepping to the right of our left brains, we can all uncover feelings of well being that are often sidelined by brain chatter. In My Stroke of Insight, Taylor provides a valuable recovery guide for those touched by brain injury and an inspiring testimony that inner peace is accessible to anyone. My Stroke of Insight. Okay. I like to just get started without reading the introduction, but I am going to read the introduction. Introduction, heart to heart, brain to brain. Every brain has a story, and this is mine. 10 years ago, I was at Harvard Medical School performing research and teaching young professionals about the human brain. But on December 10th, 1996, I was given a lesson of my own. That morning, I experienced a rare form of stroke in the left hemisphere of my brain, a major hemorrhage due to an undiagnosed congenital malformation of the blood vessels in my head erupted unexpectedly. Within 4 brief hours, through the eyes of a curious brain anatomist, she's a neuroanatomist, I watched my mind completely deteriorate in its ability to process information. By the end of that morning, I could not walk, talk, read, write, or recall any of my life. Curled up in a little fetal ball, I felt my spirit surrender to my death, and it certainly never dawned on me that I would ever be capable of sharing my story with anyone. My Stroke of Insight, a brain scientist's personal journey, is a chronological documentation of the journey I took into the formless abyss of a silent mind, where the essence of my becoming became enfolded in a deep inner peace. This book is a weaving of my academic training with personal experience and insight. As far as I am aware, this is the first documented account of a neuroanatomist who has completely recovered from a severe brain hemorrhage. I'm thrilled that these words will finally go out into the world where they might do the most good. More than anything, I am grateful to be alive and celebrative of the time I have here. Initially, I was motivated to endure the agony of recovery thanks to the many beautiful people who reached out with unconditional love. Over the years, I have remained obedient to this project because of the young woman who contacted me out of desperation to understand why her mother, who died from a stroke, had not dialed 911, and because of the elderly gentleman who was laden with worry that his wife had suffered enormously while in a coma before her death. I have remained tethered to my computer with my faithful dog Nia on my lap. For the many caregivers who have called in search of direction and hope, I have persisted with this work for the 700,000 people in our society and their families who will experience a stroke this year. If just one person reads Morning of the Stroke, recognizes the symptoms of a stroke, and calls for help sooner rather than later, then my efforts over the last decade will be more than rewarded. My stroke of insight falls into four natural divisions. The first portion, Jill's pre stroke life, introduces you to who I was before my brain went offline. I describe why I grew up to be a brain scientist, a little of my academic journey, my advocacy interests, and my personal quests. I was living large. I was a brain scientist at Harvard, serving on the national board of NAMI, the National Allegiance on Mental Illness, and traveling the country as the singing scientist. I follow this very brief personal synopsis with a little simple science, which is designed to help you understand what was going on in my brain biologically on the morning of the stroke. If you ever wondered what it might feel like to have a stroke, then the morning of the stroke chapters are for you. Here, I take you on a very unusual journey into the step by step deterioration of my cognitive abilities as viewed through the eyes of a scientist. As the hemorrhage in my brain grew larger and larger, I relate the cognitive deficits I was experiencing to the underlying biology. As a neuroanatomist, I must say that I learned as much about my brain and how it functions during that stroke as I had in all my years of academia. By the end of that morning, my consciousness shifted into a perception that I was at one with the universe. Since that time, I have come to understand how it is that we are capable of having a mystical or metaphysical experience relative to our brain anatomy. If you know of someone who has had a stroke or some other type of brain trauma, then the recovery chapters may prove to be an invaluable source. Here, I share the chronological journey of my recovery, including more than 50 tips about things I needed or didn't need in order to recover completely. My recommendations for recovery are listed in the back of the book for your convenience. I hope you will share this information with anyone who may benefit. Finally, my stroke of insight defines what this stroke has taught me about my brain. At this point, you will realize that this brain is not really about a stroke. More accurately, the stroke was the traumatic event that through which the insight came. This book is about the beauty and resiliency of our human brain because of its innate ability to constantly adapt to change and recover function. Ultimately, it's about my brain's journey into the right hemisphere consciousness, where I became enveloped in a deep inner peace. I have resurrected the consciousness of my left hemisphere in order to help others achieve that same inner peace without having to experience stroke. I hope you enjoy the journey. And so we begin. Chapter 1, Jill's pre-stroke life. I'm a trained and published neuroanatomist. I grew up in Terre Haute, Indiana. Okay. One of my older brothers, who is only 18 months older than I, was diagnosed with the brain disorder schizophrenia. He was officially diagnosed at the age of 31, but showed obvious signs of psychosis for many years prior to that. During our childhood, he was very different from me in the way he experienced reality and chose to behave. As a result, I became fascinated with the human brain at an early age. I wondered how it could be possible that my brother and I could share the same experience, but walk away from the situation with completely different interpretations about what had just happened. This difference in perception, information processing, and output motivated me to become a brain scientist. My undergraduate academic journey began at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. In the late 1970s, because of my interactions with my brother, I was hungry to understand what normal was at a neurological level. At that time, the subject of neuroscience was such a young field that it was not yet offered on the IU campus as a formal area of specialization. By studying both psychological psychology, and human biology, I learned as much as I could about the human brain. My first real job in the world of medical science turned out to be an enormous blessing in my life. I was hired as a lab technician at the Terre Haute Center for Medical Education, which is a branch of the Indiana University School of Medicine hosted on the campus of Indiana State University. My time was evenly divided between the medical human gross anatomy lab and the neuroanatomy research lab. For 2 years, I was immersed in medical education, and well mentored by Dr. Robert C. Murphy, I fell in love with dissecting the human body. Bypassing the master's degree, I spent the next 6 years officially enrolled in the ISU Department of Life Science PhD program. My course load was dominated by the first year medical school curriculum, and my research specialty was neuroanatomy under the guidance of Dr. William J. Anderson. In 1991, I received my doctorate and felt competent to teach human gross anatomy, human neuroanatomy, and histology at the medical school level. In 1988, during my time at the THCME and ISU, my brother was officially diagnosed with schizophrenia. Biologically, he is the closest thing to me that exists in the universe. I wanted to understand why I could take my dreams and connect them to reality and make my dreams come true. What was different about my brother's brain such that he could not connect his dreams to a common reality and they instead became delusions? I was eager to pursue research in schizophrenia. Following commencement from ISU, I was offered a postdoctoral research position at Harvard Medical School in the Department of Neuroscience. I spent 2 years working with Dr. Roger Tootle on the localization of area MT, which is located in the part of the brain's visual cortex that tracks movement. I was interested in this project because a high percentage of individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia exhibit abnormal eye behavior when watching moving objects. After helping Roger anatomically identify Area MT's location in the human brain, I followed my heart and transferred into the Harvard Medical School Department of Psychiatry. It was my goal to work in the lab of Dr. Francine M. Ben- Benez at McLean Hospital. Dr. Benez is a world renowned expert in the post mortem investigation of the human brain as it relates to schizophrenia. I believed this would be how I could make my contribution to helping people stricken with the same brain disorder as my brother. The week before I began my new position at McLean Hospital, my dad, Hal, and I flew to Miami to attend the 1993 annual conference of NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Hal, a retired Episcopalian minister with a PhD in counseling psychology, had always been an advocate for social justice. We were both motivated to attend this convention to learn more about NAMI and what we could do to merge our energy with theirs. NAMI is the largest grassroots organization dedicated to improving the lives of persons living with serious mental illness. At that time, NAMI had a membership of approximately 40,000 families with a loved one who is psychiatrically diagnosed. Now, NAMI has a membership of approximately 220,000 families. The National NAMI organization advocates at the national level, while the state NAMIs advocate at the state level. In addition, there are more than 1,100 local NAMI affiliates scattered around the country providing support, education, and advocacy opportunities for families at the community level. That trip to Miami changed my life. A group of 1,500 people comprised of parents, siblings, and offspring, and individuals diagnosed with severe mental illness gathered together for support, education, advocacy, and research related issues. Until I met other siblings of individuals with mental illness, I had not realized what a profound impact my brother's illness had on my life. In the course of those few days, I found a family of people who understood the anguish I felt at the loss of my brother to his schizophrenia. They understood my family's struggle with access qual- to help him access quality treatment. They fought together as an organized voice against the social injustice and stigma related to mental illness. They were armed with educational programs for themselves as well as for the public about the biological nature of these disorders. Equally important, they rallied with the brain researchers to help find a cure. I felt that I was in the right place at the right time. I was a sibling, a scientist, and passionate about helping people like my brother. In my soul, I felt that I had found not only a cause worthy of my effort, but also an extended family. The week after the Miami convention, I arrived at McLean Hospital, stoked and eager to start my new job in the laboratory for structural neuroscience, the research domain of Dr. Francine Benez. And I'm probably pronouncing her name wrong, but it's Benes. So I was all abuzz and thrilled to begin my postmortem investigations into the biological basis of schizophrenia. Francine, whom I affectionately called the Queen of Schizophrenia, is an amazing research assistant. Just watching how she thinks, how she explores, and how she pieces together what she learns from data was a total joy for me. It was a privilege to witness her creativity, an experimental sign, an experimental design, and her persistence, precision, and efficiency in running a research lab. This job was a dream come true. Studying the brain of individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia brought me a feeling of purpose. On the first day of my new job, however, Francine threw me for a loop when she informed me that the infrequency of brain donations from families of individuals with mental illness had created a long term shortage of brain tissue for post mortem investigation. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had just spent the better half of a week at the National NAMI with hundreds of other families with members diagnosed with severe mental illness. Dr. Lou Judd, a former director of the National Institute on Mental Health, had moderated the research plenary, and several leading scientists had presented their research. NAMI families love sharing and learning about brain research, so I found it mind boggling that there could be a lack of donated tissue. I decided this was merely a public awareness issue. I believed that once NAMI families knew that there was a research tissue shortage, they would promote brain donation within the organization and resolve the problem. The next year, 1994, I was elected to the National NAMI Board of Directors. It was a thrill for me to be of service to this wonderful organization, a huge honor and responsibility. Of course, the base of my platform was the value of brain donation and the shortage of psyche, psych, psychiatrically diagnosed tissue available for scientists to do their work. I called it the tissue issue. At the time, the average age of a NAMI member was 67 years old. I was only 35. I felt proud to be the youngest person ever elected to this board. I had lots of energy and was raring to go. With my new status within the National NAMI organization, I immediately began keynoting at state NAMI annual conventions all around the country. Before I began this venture, the Harvard Brain Tissue Resource Center Brain Bank, which was positioned right next to the Bennis lab, was receiving fewer than 3 brains a year from psychiatrically diagnosed individuals. This was barely enough tissue for Francine's lab to do its work, much less for the brain bank to supply tissue to the other reputable labs that requested it. Within a few months of my traveling around and educating our NAMI families about the tissue issue, the number of brain donations began to increase. Currently, the number of donations from the psychiatrically diagnosed population ranges from 25 to 35 per year. The scientific community would make good use of 100 per year. I realized that early on in my tissue issue presentations, the subject of brain donations would make some of my audience members squirm uncomfortably. There was this predictable moment when my audience would realize, oh my gosh, she wants my brain. And I would say to them, well, yes, I do, but don't worry, I'm in no hurry. To combat their obvious apprehension, I wrote the Brain Bank jingle titled 1 800 Brain Bank and began traveling with my guitar as the singing scientist. As I neared the subject of brain donation and the tension in the room began to rise, I'd pull out my guitar and sing for them. The Brain Bank jingle seems to be just goofy enough to effectively dampen the tension, open hearts, and make it okay for me to communicate my message. My efforts with NAMI brought deep meaning to my life and my work, and the lab flourished. My primary research project in the Bennis lab involved working with Francine to create a protocol where we could visualize 3 neurotransmitter systems in the same piece of tissue. Neurotransmitters are the chemicals within which brain cells communicate. This was important work since the newer atypical antipsychotic medications are designed to influence multiple neurotransmitter systems rather than just one. Our ability to visualize 3 different systems in the same piece of tissue increased our ability to understand the delicate interplay between these systems. It was our goal to better understand the microcircuitry of the brain, which cells, which cells and which area of the brain communicate with which chemicals, and in what quantities of those chemicals. The better we understood what the differences were at a cellular level between the brains of individuals diagnosed with a severe mental illness and normal control brains, the closer the medical community would be to helping those in need with appropriate medications. In the spring of 1995, this work was featured on the cover of Biotechnique's journal, and in 1996, it won me the prestigious MyCell Award from the Harvard Medical School Department of Psychiatry. I loved working in the lab and I loved sharing the work with my NAMI family. And then the unthinkable happened. I was in my mid 30s and thriving both professionally and personally, but in one fell swoop, the rosiness of my life and promising future evaporated. I woke up on December 10th, 1996, to discover that I had a brain disorder of my own. I was having a stroke. Within 4 brief hours, I watched my mind completely deteriorate in its ability to process all stimulation coming in through my senses. This rare form of hemorrhage rendered me completely disabled, whereby I could not walk, talk, read, write, or recall any aspects of my life. I realize you are probably eager to begin reading the personal account of the morning of the stroke. However, in order for you to more clearly understand what was going on inside of my brain, I have chosen to present some simple science in chapter 2 and 3. Please don't let this section scare you away. I have done my best to keep it user friendly with lots of simple pictures of the brain so you can understand the anatomy underlying my cognitive, physical, and spiritual experiences. If you absolutely must skip these chapters, then rest assured they will be here for you. as a reference. I encourage you to read this section first. However, as I believe it will profoundly simplify your understanding. Okay, I encourage you to read this section first, however, as I believe it will profoundly simplify your understanding. That is the end of chapter 1, and I am going to continue on, but I'm going to end this video here. Okay, goodbye.